afternoony. You down on the beach by the looks of it?
Down on the beach. Needed a little bit of a trip down to the coast this time. Down Chesil Beach, look. A little bit of tone down there. And have an ice cream if I can find one. So how are you this morning or this afternoon, should I say?
I'm great. Yeah, I'm great.
Yeah, all
fine.
good.
Yeah, good. Yeah, what are we talking about this week then?
So this week, as our viewers and listeners may have seen from the teaser, the Warble teaser that's been out there, I've been chatting to James Sale, the guru of motivation, the creator of motivational maps, the poet beyond belief, the man with, a brain the size of a planet, to be perfectly honest. And,
I tell you what, these podcasts, they're better than the BBC.
Well, it's certainly more interesting listening to Jeremy Vine, that's for bloody sure. I tell you, get some great people on. No, it's been really good. Been chatting to James, been talking about motivation and employees and how it impacts the customer experience, and we've been talking black pepper and gods. So should we listen and see what happens?
Gods and black pepper, is there anything better? Let's go for it.
So, yes, hello, I'm delighted today to be joined by Mr. James Sale. It says on various websites he is the creator of motivational maps. He is the guru of motivation, and to top it all off, he's an author as well of multiple books as well. So in his spare time, I don't know what he gets up to, but we're delighted to have you here today, James. Thank you ever so much. And it'd be great if you could just say hello to our viewers and our listeners and give us a little bit of a brief introduction to motivation and maps and how you got into it.
Well, hi, Richard. Thank you very much for inviting me onto your program. As you know, I have been involved with motivation for quite a long while now. In fact, Motivational Maps Limited has been running for 15 years, but I guess there's about a 5-year run into that before I actually, with my wife, founded the company as a limited company, and we put the stuff online. We were experimenting with the product manually and developing it, etc., etc. So essentially, how I got involved with motivation was I'd been a management consultant, coach, trainer since 1995. And I had a number of clients, dozens of clients. In fact, at one point I was an investors in people advisor. And so that was, you can imagine what that led to, all sorts of business links and techs that were giving you work in order to go in there and get the companies up to speed. The thing about it I noticed was the word motivation kept coming up, but it was very fluffy. Mm-hmm. It was like, in fact, there's a book called Super Teams. It's from the late 80s. It's a fabulous book. It's got a lot of practical things in it all. But if you look at the index, it tells you how to build a super team, but the word motivation occurs once. You see, so it's like, and that occurs all the time. It's not just that. Belbin's book, his first book on teams, the Belbin Team Inventory, actually, I don't think has got the word motivation in the index at all. Uh-huh. So there you are doing all these roles, doing the Belbin inventory, but these books don't actually include the word motivation. And when they do include it, it's like a given. It's a sort of, well, we all know what we mean by that, so let's do it. And what occurred to me as I was doing this work was that it lacked a language to describe motivation apart from the pleasure-pain principle, that is the way and towards motivation of NLP. Mm-hmm. It lacked a language to describe motivation. And then on top of the language, it didn't have a metric to measure it. Mm-hmm. And so I set myself the task of actually trying to rectify that problem. So I won't go into how that came about, but essentially motivational maps is the result of a problem I experienced on the ground as a coach consultant, realizing everyone was talking this stuff, but actually they didn't really know what they were talking about. And so I wanted to actually correct that.
Yeah. Absolutely. Oh, fantastic. Yeah. And in terms of the motivational maps themselves, we, from an Insight 6.0 in Dorset and Wiltshire point of view, we utilize those quite a bit when we're working with organizations about the customer experience. And some people go, well, hang on, how does that work? And this is where I'd like to talk to you a little bit further now about how does that then, so motivation, we've all got motivation in different ways and different forms, and we can now start to measure it somewhat with the likes of the motivational map tool. So how does that then go and fit into the idea of employees? And at the moment, I think it's really relevant because we're all in this horrible sort of moment of or being on what I like to call the COVID coaster of emotions. Yeah. Minute up, 1 minute down. And how does that impact from an employee point of view?
Well, I mean, it's such a great question. There's so many things I could say about this. It's really a fascinating area. And on the subject of COVID, just as a sidebar, of course, I'm sure you have noticed what I've noticed in all my experiences with companies since COVID started. There are two types of company. There are companies for whom COVID is some sort of godsend, like an excuse for bad customer service, excuse for lack of focus, an excuse, and it's COVID, it's COVID this, it's COVID that. I could give you specific examples in retail, in service industries, and it's just a nightmare. There are those who use it as an excuse, and then there are those who get seriously creative about it, who are highly motivated to give the customer a really great experience despite it. And I just quickly, I was in Winchester 3 or 4 weeks ago for my birthday. I was seeing my son and his wife in there. We had two nights. We're staying in a hotel. I won't go into the hotel, but basically I had 2 nights out. I went to a national Italian chain of restaurants for 1 night out, and I went to a privately owned restaurant called Bangkok in Jewelry Street, which is a Thai restaurant, privately owned, where I had an absolutely awesome customer experience. I won't go into why that was awesome at this point, because we'll come up later on, but the national chain was just disgraceful. And I actually said at the end of it to my wife, I said, we'll never go there again. And she totally agreed. It was like, but just to give you a flavor of just how awful it was, I had a pizza. I was in an Italian restaurant. I ordered a pizza. I got this pizza in front of me, which I would only describe as good. I wouldn't describe it as excellent. I wouldn't describe it as outstanding. It was possibly good, possibly poor. And then this guy walked away from me. I said, excuse me. And he said, well, what? I said, I'd like some black pepper. You know, they get the mill and they do. Oh, can't do that, sir. It's COVID. I'm in an Italian restaurant. And this guy says to me, he can't give me black pepper. I said, well, I'm sorry. I said, I want some black pepper with my pizza. And so this then absolutely fazed this guy. It fazed the staff. They spent 5 minutes while my pizza was cooling. And then he came back to me. And Joe, he gave me those little tiny sachets you get in things. Gave me a little tiny sachet. And then, as if to make it like meaningful, he put these gloves on and he sort of put it down on the table as if to say, look, now it's COVID-free black pepper and a little thing that you are going to take out and apply yourself. I thought, what absolute tosh this is. I mean, it's just so unbelievable. So that was a sidebar issue on COVID. But to come back to the central point about the employees, because it begins with the employees. It begins with the employees, because unless the employees are completely customer focused, the business is going to fail. It's absolutely going to fail. So I've got a new book coming out next month called Mapping Motivation for Top Performing Teams. And you'll be pleased to know there's a whole chapter in it on customer service, a whole chapter. Now, how has this come about? Well, the first thing to understand is that when you go into a shop, let's just take that as what we're buying or selling, because everyone understands. We've all been into shops, whether we use business to business or not is another issue, but we all go into a shop as a consumer. We're a customer. We go into a shop and we want to buy something. So the key thing about this is actually, what's the experience going to be like? I remember going into Woolworths 1 month before, in Glastonbury, 1 month before they shut down, before they went bankrupt. And I had a dreadful customer experience. I was in a queue, 2 people at the till who kept on talking to each other as if what they were saying was really of interest to the customers. We waited. I got to the front. I had a video which had a lock on it, a security lock, which they couldn't find how to open. I mean, it just went on. And you thought, I'm not surprised Woolworths is going absolutely broke. So these 2 people should have been a team that was working together. 4 things constitute the team. So firstly, what's the remit? I'll come back to that point in a minute. 2, interdependency. We rely on each other to support each other, not to have a tea break while we're serving the customers. 3, belief that teams outperform individuals. And 4thly, which they clearly didn't have, accountability. Accountability to the whole organization, to stop creating silos in the organization. We're all in this and we've all got to work together. So those 4 things. But here's the interesting thing. When we come to the remit, most people usually interpret that as meaning the mission. So what we do. Motivational maps interprets that in 3 distinct ways. There's a chapter on each of these 3 things. The remit means, yes, what we do. That's one chapter. But it also means the values we insist upon. That's also part of the remit. What are the values we must insist upon? And that's got massive implications for customer service. But the third and final thing is actually the customer focus itself. You know, we need to treat customer focus as being one of the key thing. In fact, before we deal with the things that we're doing, what's the customer focus here? And there are 4 levels of customer service, because there are 4 levels of motivation, there are 4 levels of performance, and there are 4 levels, therefore, of customer service. Why are there 4 levels? Because of the Pareto principle, 80-20, 4-1. This is what we all intuitively know. So there's no service at all. That's not a level. It's just there's nothing happening. That's when you employ people who are complete bozos or completely don't know what they're doing. Then there's poor, there's good, there's excellent, and then there's outstanding. Now, the thing to understand about that, well, there's several things to understand about it, is firstly, when I say a good level of service, of course, what I really mean is an average level of service. And what that means really is a mediocre level of service. What that means is I go into a restaurant, somebody sits me down at a table, gives me a menu, takes the order, gives me the food, and that's it. I don't go back to that restaurant. That's just one up from a cafeteria, which is basically a poor level of service, where you serve yourself, you go up, you have to get it all on board yourself. You have them in a sports hall, it's very convenient, but actually nobody would go there unless they had to go there. So clearly, the beginning of running a successful business has got to start at the excellent level, and it's got to start at the outstanding level. What we should be aiming for, whatever level we're at. And by the way, this chapter's got the 5 key things in it which they're looking for in terms of customer experience, and a little grid to help you, a chart to mark where you are with it. So I could come back to that in a minute if you want me to. But here's the thing about it. We need to go to the very top level. And the book cites, for me, the greatest customer service mission statement that's ever been made. And I'm going to read it to you because it's such a fabulous mission statement. If you understand, and in fact, it's got some exercises around it. It comes from the Ritz-Carlton hotel chain. Yeah. Have you ever seen it?
I've not. I have, yes, but please do for our.
Okay. Well,
our
it actually says the Ritz-Carlton experience in live. By the way, when I read this to you, try and identify what is the word that really is the key word in this sentence. The Ritz-Carlton experience enlivens the senses, instills well-being, and fulfills even the unexpressed wishes and needs of our guests. Now, well, I don't want to put you on the spot, but the key word there is the unexpressed wishes. Because if you could anticipate the unexpressed wishes of your customers, you'd be loving them. It's difficult enough to actually anticipate the unexpressed wishes of your wife or your husband or your partner. And as for your children, it's almost impossible. The very people we love, we cannot actually get to the point where we could actually fulfill their unexpressed wishes. And what they've got as a credo, as a mission statement, as a remit, is actually we're expecting our staff, and they actually fully realize, if you go deep further into what they're doing, only a team can do it. Only a team can reach that level of intuition and nuance and expertise, whereby you look at somebody wandering around the lobby and you think, do you know what? They're looking for a tube map, or they want to get a taxi. I need to actually go up to them and get that taxi for them. You know, so this is what, and that's a hotel, but actually it applies in all business.
Yeah, absolutely.
We have to love, and when you love and you give them those kind of experiences, of course, you retain them.
Just talking about those businesses you were talking earlier on about, those people who've COVID's an excuse, but some people have taken it up and have made it work, and how tech, and this is really interesting as well. You mentioned this love piece. It's really interesting because we talk about this. If you're going to get something that's going to improve the process for your customers and the whole experience they go through, brilliant, because there's lots of great tech out there, but you have to wrap it in love.
You have to wrap it in love.
You have to wrap it in love.
You have to wrap it in love, and technology cannot do it on its own. It simply cannot handle the ambiguity and the need for human contact that we all have.
So this is the really interesting piece for me. You know, it's great, the insight in terms of the employee side of things. And yes, we need to make sure we get that right. And it has a massive impact, as you said there. If the teams are working well together and the employees have got motivation at the right levels, has a big impact on the customer's experience. So from your point of view, just to sort of bring our conversation towards a close, how does that impact the motivation of a customer?
Well,
can we look
I'll tell you what, Well, can I just talk about, before we get to that point, we've got to ask ourselves the question about the motivators with the employees.
Yeah.
What I've got in my chapter on the book is actually something that will quite shock a number of motivational mappers. And it's basically this, which is that when you really think about which of the motivators are most likely to actually bond with and be interested in the customers, it's not the growth motivators, it's not the achievement motivator, it's the relationships, and in particular, the friend motivator. And I do a case study based on this. Basically, we've got to ask, so the friend motivator and the relationship motivators tend to be risk averse, they don't like change. But the key thing is to identify who the friends are in your team, because these are the very people who may be able to help you innovate because they know the customer best of all. So we have actually in the book 3 questions that we ask the friend motivator to help the boss of the company to actually get some ideas. So just to put these to you, interested? Can I give them to you?
Please do.
Yeah. So Richard, I hope you don't mind, but I wanted to talk to you personally for your help, because I know from what I've seen of your work, from your map, that you really care about the customers, perhaps in a way that others don't quite get. Are you happy to help me here? So it's a setup question. It's not assuming that you're the employee, so you're bound to tell me what I want to know. I want you to help me.
Great.
Now that really appeals to the friend motivator. The actual question is, I'm concerned that we're not doing all we could for our customers and that we could add a lot more value in our offerings to them. What do you think we could do to be better in this specific area? And then a follow-up question, which is, that's some great ideas. How do you think we can sell this to the rest of the team? How can we implement this to your customers afterwards? Is there a time frame you have in mind? It's drawing in the people who've got this kind of rapport, who know the customer best, in order to take some ideas from them, because they will know best how to do it.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So on a motivational front, I think getting down to the relationship type motivators with the staff is actually, and unlocking the power that's in them is really where the action's going to be.
Yeah, absolutely. And the maps are a really great tool of understanding where your teams or individuals within your team sit, where their motivations lie. So being able to pinpoint those and have the right conversations with the right people is going to benefit the organization, but ultimately, as you've just mentioned there, it's going to be a benefit for the customers. And if we're focusing on the customer, then you retrofit or you work backwards, then it does have an impact on the employees, because they see the customers having an enjoyable experience, they're returning, etc., etc. So, you know, it all comes together, doesn't it, in the end? So it's fantastic. And then that sort of links to that previous question I'd asked you about, that the motivation of the customer then to return.
Yes.
You know, there's an area for them to come back, is there not? Because they have their own motivators.
Yes. So, well, okay, let me give you one thought about that, because we talked about the need to love the customer at some level, which is not superficial or manipulative. It's got to be kind of sincere. And we've all experienced this, where people really want to help you. They really want to help you. They really seem to have this focus on you and solving your problem, whatever that happens to be. Even online, you can sometimes get, even when you phone up a bank or a telecoms company, you sometimes just get lucky with that one person who is really there, who isn't going to pass the buck.
Yeah.
So that's really good. So I would just make one point on this, since I realize we've probably got running out of time. But in my system of the map, we have 4 levels of service. And for poor, good, excellent, outstanding. You can call them different things, but that's what we like to call them. But here's the thing to keep in mind, which I think is really important about bringing the customer back. The difference between poor and good service is very big. It's a big jump. It's a chasm. The difference between good and excellent service is a big jump. It's a chasm. It's a big thing. The difference between excellent and outstanding is not a big jump. It's a small jump. It's almost like a mindset jump. And the difference, actually, and it's why I use the word outstanding, is actually contained in the word outstanding. Because somebody who performs at an outstanding level stands out. So what I'm really saying is that it's not enough to serve the customer in an outstanding way, in an excellent way. You have to, in a funny sort of way, tell them you're doing that. You have to remind them. In fact, a word I'd like to use rather than tell is to remind them. It's a kind of self-PR you do on your own performance. And in telling yourself you're performing at this excellent level, you actually reinforce the fact you're performing at that level, which actually gives you more energy to perform at that level. So you've got to ask yourself, have we told our customers all we need to tell them about what we're doing? Are we reminding them in subtle and not so subtle ways about, hey, when you're with us, this is what you're getting. This is the solution. This is fabulous, isn't it? This is the experience with us.
Yeah.
Compare that. Here's the Bangkok restaurant in Winchester, and here's the dreadful thing on the other side of the road with the chain. Jeez.
Don't go there again.
Don't go there again.
Fantastic, absolutely fantastic, and I absolutely agree. There is that. Where are you shooting for in terms of your mission for your, and what's your goal for your customers? What do you want for them to say, think, and feel about your organization? And that motivation part is the feelings, is the energy, as you talk about it in your books. And we know if the energy is there, the customers can sense that energy and they're attracted back to it as well. So
Yes.
it's a great way of the PR, of ensuring your own PR there. It's absolutely superb.
Absolutely. Can I give you one last thought then on that?
One last one.
A word I haven't used yet, and that's actually it's enthusiasm. And it could be said it's a form of motivation, basically, but enthusiasm is arguably the single most attractive quality in another human being. Aside from looks, aside from qualities and intelligence and creativity, actually what people like, it's why we love children, because children are incredibly enthusiastic. But here's the thing that's perhaps new about this. The word enthusiasm comes from the Greek en theos, God inspired. Whenever we find people, it's like when we find people who are really enthusiastic, there's a sense of godlike ability about them, male or female. It's actually an incredibly attractive thing. So that to have an organization, a team of people that are like that they're all inspired, it's like a divine situation.
And what an amazing place to end our brief discussion, James. Thank you ever so much. Insight from the motivation, energy point of view. Let's all be enthusiastic. Let's all be enthusiastic about working with our customers and our clients out there. So, and James, when is your book available? Is it out?
The 15th of December. It's due out on the 15th. It's available at the moment. You can just check amazon.co.uk. You'll find Mapping Motivation for Top Performing Teams. It's there. You get a discount if you order it in advance. So I strongly recommend it. It's full of great stuff, not just on customer, but on motivation generally, on a whole range of fascinating things, Richard.
Of course, James. Thanks ever so much for your time. It's great to see you, and have a great weekend, and we'll speak to you again soon, no doubt. Thank you, James.
I look forward to it. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you, Richard. Bye.
Bye-bye.
So there we go, Mr. James Sale. You could sit and listen to him for hours and hours and hours. As you could probably tell, I had to try and sort of squeeze him down into sort of within the 20 minutes or so that we're trying to get our conversations in. But I could have spoken to him all day. Really, really interesting stuff. What were your key points out of that one, Mr. Huxtable?
Well, I tell you, if motivation and getting as much packed into 20 minutes was an Olympic sport, he would be in Team GB, wouldn't he? My head is just like, wow. Talk about expand my knowledge. Yeah, look, wow, what an absolute font of not just knowledge, but really, really interesting stories. And his perception of how he links motivation directly to the customer experience is just, he said something, didn't he? He said, when he was talking about when he was working with Belbin, and he was I think it was something else he was talking about. He used to, the investors in people. He was talking about how everyone talks about motivation and they all thought they knew what motivation was, but there was no measurement. So he set about defining that through motivational maps. So yeah, what an interesting guy. I thought his theory on a couple of things. Firstly, his point around how businesses have reacted to the pandemic. There's been a group that have used it as an absolute excuse to give rubbish service, and my God, thank God for that group of really rubbish businesses, because they've given us something to talk about in the last 27 weeks. So thank you for that. But then he talks about this other group that really taking the bull by the horns and trying to delight their customers, and boy, he's got that bang on the money, I think. Anyway,
Yeah, no, absolutely agree. You know, it's a challenging way of looking at things, but he's absolutely right. You know, there are people who've gone, well, yeah, it's because of COVID. It's like those people we often talk about when we talk about, you know, gaining some insight now, thinking about what's going on with your clients or your customers, and people say, oh, we can't do that, we're too busy. I mean, if there was a table here right now, I would be smacking my head against it, because it's just one of those. What do you mean? How? What? Yeah. So it's always this excuse, isn't it? It's that desire to want to make a move forward. And I think his comment about enthusiasm. You know, the organisations who see the opportunity have got the enthusiasm, and guess what? People are drawn to them. So, you know, being godlike in the way you are acting within your business and your teams are, it's spot on. You know, motivation, you can feel it. It is energy. It is energy.
It is energy, and another great example that's really resonated with me actually, and that I'm gonna reuse going forward. I'm gonna mercilessly steal this from James Sale, is his comment around his 2 restaurants that he went out to, and the first restaurant, that was a pizza chain that he bought a pizza in with his wife and his son and daughter-in-law, I think he said, and he had his pizza and he asked for black pepper, and then they looked at him as if much to say, black pepper? Have you not heard of COVID? And you know, coming back with a little packet of pepper, and they went like, and look, I'm being glib, and there will be lots of reasons. I'm sure that particular chain has said you can't, do the old pepper above the pizza. But really, have we lost all sense of common decency and common sense?
Yeah.
And he contrasted it, didn't he, with the private restaurant that he went to, and he talked about how different that experience was, and directly linking that, that motivation in that restaurant, that they were on, it was down to them if that restaurant was going to be successful, and therefore they were going the extra mile. They were motivated to be successful, as opposed to the young man that was working in the chain restaurant, which turned up for his job. I'm sure he was a lovely, well-meaning young man, but actually, it probably wasn't a massive focus of his to make sure that the client experience was all right, the customer experience was right. It was more about making sure he didn't give anybody COVID through, passing them some black pepper, which that is a metaphor, I think, for this whole 12 months that we've been in around, people following the rules, not following the rules, taking things to the extreme, not taking things to the extreme. And that is just a really good example of it.
And it's a great way of looking at it as well, from that buy-in. So when you think about your teams in any organization, so you've got your front of house staff, you're in a legal firm, you're an accountancy firm, you've got your front of house staff. Are they bought in to the new process that's been put in place because of COVID? Do they understand the bigger picture? This is where our motivation comes into play. As James said, we've got 9 motivators. They're into 3 sections, and they make a big difference in terms of how much energy we actually will give to the job we do, because it's from within. This is deep stuff, and it drives our behaviors. So if we understand what's motivating us ourselves, we've got awareness, brilliant, because we can adjust what we do and how we do it. And if you've got front of house people whose motivations don't lie in front of house way of thinking about things, they haven't got the friend motivator, they haven't got the desire to build relationships, then is there another way you can do things? And this is all about stopping, thinking, reflecting, as we've said before. So I think the key thing, that comes out of it is, again, we say it all the time, start with your teams. How motivated are they? Because the customers pick up on it. And the customers pick up on the behavior, and that's the key thing. So, we can offer the motivational maps to any of our listeners out there who would like to understand what's going on with themselves as a leader or with their teams, because we can look at the team maps as well, and we can really understand what your percentage is. That's right. You can put a score to it. How do you do that? Well, it's really simple. 10-minute questionnaire. You get your report. It's nice and easy. And then you can see how much a drop in motivation. I mentioned my COVID coaster. When you're on the bottom part of that COVID coaster ride, how do we get people back out of that quickly? Because when they're back out of it quicker, they're performing at higher levels, customers are happier. I've said it many, many times. I'm going to keep saying it. It's true.
A huge thank you for sharing, commenting. We want more people to hear what we're warbling about, even if they just like cider. It's fine.
It don't matter.
Yeah, it don't matter. And we might even do for Christmas, we might even just cider review for you. the best cider is 2020 live cider.
Live cider tasting. That could end. It could be horribly messy.
That could go exceptionally badly. The final question I want to ask you, Rich, before we go, and I'm sure all of our listeners and watchers are thinking about this: when do you start in your new role as Santa? Because that beard is coming on treat.
This is the thing, you see. I'm thinking it's been a little bit quiet over COVID. We've been talking about pivoting. I'm thinking I could be the West Country Father Christmas, isn't that? Now, Ryan, have you been a good little boy this year?
Well,
have you?
I'd like to think I have.
Anyway,
have a great week, everyone.
I've been Richard Knight.
And I've been Ryan Huxtable.
Cheers.